Okay, today's daf is Shabbat daf Kuf Daled. We're going to start at the very bottom. We're continuing with Kotev on Shabbat, writing on Shabbat, and the significance of letters. As we saw yesterday, in order to learn about letters, we'll see this a few times today, they're going to learn from the laws of writing a sefer Torah. So that's where we ended. We were talking about the fact that if you write Shem Mishimon, when you write the letter Mem in Shimon, it's a Mem that's written in the middle of a word, but it actually comes out to read like Shem, even though you didn't write actually a Mem Sofit, the Mem that's used at the end of a word. So Rav Chisda had said from here that Zot Omeret Satum Va'asao Patuach Kasher. What does this teach you? That if it's true for writing, that if you wrote Shem Mishimon, you'd be obligated on Shabbat, even though the Shem doesn't have a Mem Sofit in it, then if you're writing in a sefer Torah and you write accidentally a regular Mem instead of an ending Mem, a Mem Sofit, then your sefer Torah is good. To that we brought a Breita, which seemed to say that is not the case, because it said if you write the wrong letter, it's a problem. And we answer by saying, and that's where we ended yesterday, that he must hold, Rav Chisda must hold like the Breita, like the opinion in the Breita, with 3 lines from the bottom now of Kaf Gimel Amud Bet, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, who basically makes this drasha in order to find a source for the water libations they did on Sukkot in the Torah. He darshaned the letter Mem at the end of the word Niskehem. At the beginning, there was an extra Mem and an extra Yud and an extra Mem, which read out the word Mayim. And how did he spell Mayim? Mem Sofit, Yud Mem Sofit, right? With an ending Mem at the beginning of the word. So what do you see from here? That it must be that you can interchange them. Now notice, though, the interchanging is the opposite direction, because he takes a Mem Sofit and reads it as a regular Mem. And Rav Chisda was talking about the opposite, right? So the Gemara basically said that just like, second to last line of Kuf Gimel Amud Bet, Umida Patuach V'asao Satum Kasher, since you would now have this Mem Sofit that's going to count as a regular Mem, and that should be kasher. Now, by the way, he's not talking about laws of writing in a sefer Torah. He's just taking something that was a word in a Torah and darshaning it as if it was a mem in the beginning of the word. But let's just assume you could do that. So we say, also, nami, satum v'asao patuach kasher. We can go the reverse direction. This is what the Gemara is going to have a question about. Mi dami, are these really similar? Patuach v'asao satum. Iluye kama alele. And from here we're going to get off on a whole long tangent about how the letters came about, what's the significance of the letters. And they basically say that a mem sofit is a better letter than a mem in the middle of the word. Therefore, we could see that you would take a mem sofit, which has a higher status. In a minute we're going to see why does it have a higher status. Has a higher status and make it work like a lower status word. But would you say that if you're supposed to have a mem sofit in a word in the Torah and you wrote it as a regular mem, which is what we said about the Shem Mishimon, that would work? How could that possibly be? Da Amar Rav Chisda mem v'samach shebeluchot b'neis hayu omdim. Rav Chisda said, and this is the same Rav Chisda who said that you could switch it. He said that the mem and the samach in the luchot were standing miraculously. We're going to see this inside later, but I already have to explain what this means. What it means is that the tablets were what we call charut mishnei tzaddim. They were carved, the words, right? We always think of the luchot as a tablet with the words etched into the tablet. But now we're going to learn that the words, according to Rav Chisda, they were etched all the way. The whole thing was open on both sides. So you could see the letters on both sides of the luchot. Now, you're going to have a problem with the letter mem and samach, because what happens if you cut them out entirely? Well, the whole middle part is going to fall out also because they're round. It's a circle or a square shape. So the whole section in the middle is going to fall out of the luchot. So came Rav Chisda, and he said, so far we don't yet really understand what this has to do with, that the mem sofit was a higher status letter. We'll get to it soon. But number one, you could say it's higher status because this miracle happened with them. But I don't think that's really what they mean in the end. So now they're going to say that they basically stood miraculously. Okay, somehow that middle piece, even though it was detached from the luchot entirely, actually stood by miracle in the middle of the tablets. So they say, Ela satum v'asao patuach girue kamegarele. But if you were supposed to put a mem sofit and instead you put a mem from the middle of the word, that is actually going to lower the status, and therefore how could, even if you hold by Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, where he took a mem sofit and he said we can read it also as a regular mem, he would only do it in that direction, he wouldn't necessarily do it in the other direction. How do we know this? Why is it worse? To Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, v'itema Rabbi Chia bar Abba, either Rabbi Yirmiyah or Rabbi Chia bar Abba said this. Mansepach, okay, these are the 5 letters that have special ending letters. They're different in the middle of the word or different at the end of the word. Mem, Nun, Sadi, Pei, Kaf. Sofim Amarum. It was the Nevi'im who came up with these letters, okay? Now, but we're going to learn if the Nevi'im came up with it, and if the Mem and the Samach stood miraculously in the Luchot, what does that prove? Which one came first? Which one existed in the time of the Luchot before we got to the prophets? Obviously, the Mem Sofi was first. You might have thought Mansepach means they came up with the ending form. No, it's the opposite. The end form was the original form. Later, they came up with the middle form. So basically, if you say that, then to write the wrong thing in a sefer Torah, as long as you wrote the Mem Sofi, you're in good shape because that was the one that was written the earliest. But if you were supposed to write a Mem Sofi and you accidentally wrote a Mem like Shem Mishimon, where you want to say Shem is actually a word, but it has a Mem from the middle of the word in it instead of from the end of the word, that wouldn't be kosher in a sefer Torah according to this because you're actually lowering the status because you're using a letter that was a much later invention. So the Gemara is going to reject this whole theory. Okay, the theory is that in the beginning there were Mem only Sofiot and for all the other letters also, but the Mem is what's interesting us right now. And later they added the other ones. So they say V'tizbera v'haktiv Eila hamitzvot. This is a pasuk from Vayikra Kaf Zayin. Eila mitzvot asher tziva Hashem et Moshe el bnei Yisrael b'Har Sinai. These are the laws that God commanded Moshe at Har Sinai. What are they darshan? She'ein hanavi rashai l'chadesh davar me'ata. You can't have Nevi'im. This is a very interesting thing, that you can't have prophets coming up with new laws. Okay? We don't accept new laws from prophets. So what do you see? If they can't create new things, because everything was given to Moshe at Sinai. Now, obviously, we have an issue, because what do you mean? Most of what's in the Gemara wasn't given to Moshe at Sinai. But there's a difference between, first of all, a Navi and a Chacham. A Navi is not allowed to come and say, God told me that we're supposed to change this mitzvah. Okay? That's not what the Navi's job. So therefore, if the Navi can't create anything new, then how did the Nevi'im create this Mansepach? Can't possibly be. It must have existed before. Ela mehave havai. It really did exist before. Now, if it existed previously, then that rejects our question against Rav Chisda, because then according to Rav Chisda, we said, how could you say that? You're going down a level. But if really it existed before, then you're not going down a level by writing the Mem from the middle of the word instead of a Mem at the end of the word. So, mehave havai. But we still have Sofim Amarum, so Sofim are Nevi'im, prophets. So what does that mean if they didn't create them? Well, Meida lo hava yadinan he be'emtza teva he be'sof teva. There existed Mem, 2 types of Mems. We just didn't know which is the one that's supposed to go in the beginning of the word and which is the one that's supposed to go at the end of the word. Again, it's not just Mem, it's Nun, Sadi, Pei, and Kaf. All these existed, they just didn't know what. And Atut Sofim Takninu. So came the Nevi'im and they said, this one's going to go in the middle of a word, this one's going to go at the end of a word. But the Gemara doesn't like that either, because they say, Akate, Eila mitzvot she'ena navi rasha l'chadesh davar me'ata. That's still, they're creating something. They're deciding something that they're not allowed to decide about. Ela, so what do they say? Shachachum v'chazru v'yistum. It was clear from the beginning which was supposed to go where. It was just at a certain point people forgot them, and the Nevi'im came, the prophets, and they reestablished what was established before, and therefore they're not creating anything new, they've just reestablished it, and therefore they say that's the case. Someone asked right now, I was going to mention this, why does it say Mansepach? It's not in the right order. You would think that they would go in alphabetical order. So one explanation I wrote was that Mansepach sounds like Tzofim. They wanted it to sound like, although it's not exactly, it's not the best proof, because then the Mem should have come at the end. Yeah, so I don't really know why they did it. It's not the best proof, but they wanted it to sound somewhat like Tzofim, Mansepach Tzofim. But it doesn't really make sense because the Mem should be at the end, so I don't really know why they said it like this. Sometimes when they come up with an acronym, they come up with a way that's the easiest way to say it, right? Like we talked about before, the 7 liquids that you can, that are machshir lekabel tumah, that cause things to be susceptible to impurity. It's called yad shachat dam. It just reads well. I mean, there it actually forms words. Here it doesn't really form words, but I guess maybe it was just an easier way to say it than saying it some other way. I assume that's why. Gufa. Now we're going to go back into this luchot. Amar Rav Chisda mem v'samach shebeluchot b'nes hayomdim. And now we're going to have the explanation, even though I kind of explained it. V'amar Rav Chisda k'tav shebeluchot nikra mibifnim v'nikra mibachutz. You could read it on both sides, right? Imagine if it was a tablet and it was just etched in one side, you wouldn't be able to read it from the back. But since they were etched in on both sides, the whole thing was carved out entirely. Therefore, you were able to see it on both sides. And here he describes how, in case you didn't really understand, Kigon, because it's not really Nikrami Bachutz. If you read it on the opposite side, you read it in the opposite order, right? You would read the letters come out opposite because of the way it appears. So he tells you, Kigon Nivuv Buban. If it was the word Nivuv, then on the back side you would see Buban. Or Behal Rahav. Okay, it should be flipped here. Saru Viras. It's very strange, and also another good question. If you number one question we don't really have a good answer for is Man Sepach, why it's in that order. Number two, why he chooses words that are not in the 10 Commandments. You would think if he's talking about the 10 Commandments, he would pick a word that's in the 10 Commandments. Why he chooses random words, I'm not really sure. The Mepharshim ask about this, they give answers, but I didn't find a convincing answer yet. Amrei Rabban the Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Now we have an interesting line here, and this is going to get off on a very long tangent about darshaning all the letters. Atu daridike ha'ina lebe midrasha. So the rabbis go to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and they say, the young students in the Beit Midrash, okay, the kids, came to the Beit Midrash today, va'amrei mile da'afilu b'imei Yoshua ben Nun lo itmar kavatayu. They said something that from the days of Yoshua ben Nun, or even in the days of Yoshua ben Nun, was never said anything like this. Okay, a few strange things about this Yoshua ben Nun before we get to it. First of all, just this thing, it made me think about the Little Prince, and they talk about in the Little Prince how children have a much better sense of imagination than grown-ups, right? The first scene there with the boa constrictor, and they basically say that the whole idea there is that the children have a lot more imagination, and maybe that's the idea here, that the children came to the Beit Midrash and said something that nobody else ever saw, because children have this great sense of imagination. Why Yoshua ben Nun? So the first thing to note about Yoshua ben Nun, if you have a text of Gemara in front of you, the Nun is written with a chukchik, with one, a quote, a sign of quotes, like Nun Vav with the chukchik and the Nun, which is very strange because the name is Yoshua ben Nun. Usually that's an abbreviation for something. Or Nun is actually a letter of the alphabet. So maybe they're making a play here, and when you write letters of the alphabet, you always write it with the chukchik. So maybe that's why they're using Yoshua ben Nun. Because why wouldn't they say from the times of Moshe? Why would they say from the times of Yoshua? So maybe they're trying to say because his name is like the Nun, and that's why maybe they made reference to it. Another thing they say, well, maybe because Yoshua ben Nun was the beginning of Torah Shabbat Peh. Really, Moshe was giving the Torah from Sinai, and he got everything from Sinai, but Yoshua started darshaning, and maybe that's why they're talking about the world of Drashot started in his time. Some people say because it was said about him, Vagita bo yomam v'layla, because he learned Torah day and night, or lo yamush mipia oel, right, yomam v'layla, he never left the oel, yomam v'layla, so because of that. Anyway, it's a good question why it's Yoshua ben Nun, right? Often the question's much better than the answer. So now what did they say? And here comes our long drasha. First they darshan all the letters and the names of the letters. Aleph Bet, which means Aleph Bina, learn Torah well. Okay, learn and delve into the depths of Torah. Gimel Dalid, Gimel Dalim, do good things for poor people. My time pshuta kare de Gimel. Now we're going to darshan not only the names of the letters, but right, obviously there's an issue if it all comes from the Greek alpha beta, right? This is really just the world of Drashot. Now they're going to darshan the form of the letters. So my time kare de Gimel lagabe Dalid, the Gimel of the okay. If you have the Koran, they have good. They show the letters very well. I'll kind of show you on the screen here. Right, the Gimel, the leg of the Gimel is kind of kicking the Dalid. Okay, so why is that? Because they say Delimtse le nafshe. My time. Did I read Pshuta kare de? Oh, sorry, I skipped. My time of pshuta kare de Gimel lagabe Dalid. Why is the leg of the Gimel sticking out toward the Dalid? Shekain darko shel gomel chasadim larutz achar dalim. He's running to catch the poor people to help them. Umay time of pshuta kare de Dalid lagabe Gimel. The Dalid has this part that sticks out, right? That's the difference between a Dalid and a Resh. That the part of that Dalid sticks out, jutting out toward the Gimel. Delim tzele nafshe, because the poor person makes himself found by the wealthier person. So he kind of juts himself out to be closer to be found easily. Okay, umay time of mahadar ape de Dalid Gimel. Now look at the Gimel. The Gimel is running toward the Dalid, but the Dalid is running kind of facing in the other direction, away from the Gimel. So that's deliten lebetzine ki hechi delo lichsaf mine. This is because you're supposed to give in a tsanua manner so that he's not embarrassed by you, right? His face turns away so that he doesn't look embarrassed when he gets stuck from you. So we're learning all sorts of important midot, right? The importance of learning Torah and delving into depth, the importance of helping poor people and the way how you should help them. You should run after it. You should not embarrass them. Hey Vav, zeh shmo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, Hey Vav, sign of God's name. Zayin Chet Tet Yud Kaf Lamed. If you do so now go back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Hey Vav. So if you do the first two things we said, then God will Zayin, Zanotcha, Chen, Chanotcha, Tet, Meitiv Lecha. Okay, God will both sustain you, show his, shine his face upon you, or, right, how would you say Chen? He gives his Chen to you. I can't remember the word, how to define it, but Meitiv Lecha, he will bestow goodness upon you. Yud, Noten Lecha Yerusha, he will give you Nachala, Yerusha, right, what's the word? Inheritance. V'kosher lecha keter, kaf is, he'll put a crown on you. Le'olam haba, lamed is for the future, for olam haba. Mem ptucha, mem stuma. What's the mem patuach and mem satum? Again, this is the middle letter and the closed letter. Ma'amar patuach, ma'amar satum. There's some things in the Torah that are open and very easily understandable, and there are other things that are very hard to understand, like the Ma'aseh Merkavah that we've learned about in the image in the heavens in Sefer Yechezkel. Nun kfufa, nun pshuta. Okay, nun again has this we saw yesterday. Kfufinim pshutim. Kfufinim pshutim are the letters that are the sofiot, not the mem. The mem is patuach and satum, but the nun and the kaf and the tzadi and the pei are both bent and straight. Right, depending on if they're the sofiot, the ones that go at the end are straight, whereas the other ones are bent in a bunch of places. So why nun bent and nun straight? Ne'eman kafuf, ne'eman pashut. This means, okay, there's a few different explanations, but let's go with one. If you go with God in a way where you bow your head down, meaning you look at yourself as if, right, you're humble, then ne'eman pashut, in the end you'll be standing up straight in the olam haba. Samach ayin, smoch aniyim. Now this is very similar to Ozer Dalin, help poor people. So some people say, Lishna Achrina, it's not really repeating the same idea, but it's simanim asa. Samach ayin, simanim asa. This is all these simanim in the Gemara where we have ways to remember. Often they'll say before there's a list of 5 things, so they'll give you simanim to remember what those 5 things are. Simanim asa b'Torah ukneota. Okay, this is a good way. You'll remember the Torah if you use the simanim. Pei kfufa, pei pshuta. So again, big middle of the word and end of the word. Pe patuach, pe satum. Okay, what does this mean? This is a great line, right? Sometimes you're supposed to open your mouth and say something, and there's other times where you're much better off keeping your mouth shut, right? For example, in a Beit Avel, that's a good example, right? You go to a Shiva home, if you don't have anything good to say, right, sometimes better to just keep quiet, or you might say the wrong thing. Tzadik fufa, but tzadik pshuta. Okay, again, tzadi has both. Why? Tzadik kafuf, tzadik pashut. Okay, tzadik again bows himself and ultimately he'll be raised up. So the Gemara says, Hainu ne'eman kafuf ne'eman pashut. It's the same thing. Why do you say both? Hosif la katuf kfifa kfifato. This means an extra. All the more, he'll be even more bent. Mikan shenitna Torah b'manod rosh. From here you learn the Torah was given with great gravity, meaning that when it comes to the Torah, you have to really lower yourself even more. Kuf, Kadosh, Resh, Rasha. Now we have a nice image of the Kuf and the Resh. We have God standing right next to the Rasha. Okay? Which you wouldn't expect, right? But here you have it. Umay time, and now they're going to darshan this, but they're going to darshan this in a way of a euphemism. It's not going to really be, it's going to be the opposite of what it really is, because they don't want to say it the way they really mean it. My time, a mahadre tage de kuf lagabe resh. Why is the kuf, right, this part is actually, I skipped. My time, a mahadar ape de kuf meresh. Why is the kuf turning away from the resh? Now, it's not true. It's the opposite. The kuf, okay, I'll show you again in the Koran, the kuf is facing the resh. It's the resh that's turning away. So what they're really trying to say is that the rasha is turning away from God. But what they're saying is God is really turned away from the rasha. And for what reason? Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, I can't look at the rasha, which really means that the rasha is saying I can't look at God. Umay time a mahadre tage de kuf legabe resh. There's a little crown at the top. Okay, if you saw in the picture, there's a crown at the top. The top of the crown faces the resh. So why is the crown facing the resh? So here's a nice image. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Im choser bo ani kosher lo keter kmoti. If he comes back to me and does tshuva, then I will give him a crown just like mine. Umay time akare de kuf tluya. Why is the leg hanging down? Right, it goes below the line. Di ihadar be li'aya veleo bahach. What is this? If he wants to do tshuva, I'm making it very easy for him to get in. Okay, he opens two places basically to make it simple for him to get back in. Misayeh le Rish Lakish to Amar Rish Lakish. Manda Amar im le'letzimu yalitu lanavim yitain chen. Bali tama potchim lo, bali ter masayinoto. What do they do with this pasuk? If you go with leitzim in the bad way, then he will be melitz. In other words, you will go that way. God will help you. Ulanavim yitain chen. But God will give His grace to the humble. So what does that mean? If you want to go in a bad way, God will let you. In other words, God's not going to stop you. You have free choice. This is all about free choice. You have free choice. But bali taher, but if you want to come back in, God will help you. So God basically made these two entrance ways to make it very easy to get back in. I assume, by the way, that because it's hanging down, it kind of, if you think about it, if the rasha is trying to get away, right, the bottom line kind of helps you get back in. So it allows you, it makes it easier for you. Shin shekel, taf emet. Okay, shin is a sign for lying, and taf is a sign for truth. Okay, now again, my time, a sheker merkarvan mile, emet meracha kamile. So if you look in the Koran, they show you the letters. There's a lot more space between, again, I'm not exactly sure, but I guess because the shin juts out toward the kuf, somehow they view the sheker letters as closer together and the emet words are farther apart. That's the first difference between them. So why is that? There's a very sad line. Kushta shikra shachiach, kushta lo shachiach. It's much more common to find people not telling the truth than it is to find people telling the truth. Umay time a shikra achad karekai ve'emet milabim libune. But look at the letters. Sheker, all the letters of sheker stand on one leg. Okay, this is the way you write them in the Torah. The sheker, the shin has a point at the bottom. The kuf also is very unstable because it's on this one point all the way at the bottom, and the resh is also on one leg. But the emet, all those letters have two legs basically, so they're much more stable. So you can see where they're going with this. Kushtakai. Right. By the way, emet melabim libune, it's like bricks that are piled on another, meaning they're very stable. Kushtakai shikra lokai, because truth stands and lies don't stand. Now they continue to darshan the letters, but in a different way. Now they do what we call atbash. These are different codes of the letters. So where you take the first letter and you match it to the last letter, and the second letter you match it to the second to last, and the third to last. So atbash, oti ta'ev. Now there's two ways to read this. Okay, oti ta'ev means if a rasha despises God, et avelo, as a question, I will want to go with that. I will search for him. No way. Or you can read it as a statement. Despite the fact that the rasha despises God, God seeks the rasha. Bash, bilo, and they're basically going to have the same thing for a few phrases. Bet-Shin, bilo chashak, shmi yachul alav. He doesn't want me. My name is going to go upon him. Again, could be read as a question, could be read as a statement. My name will anyway go upon him. Gar, gufo timei al rachem alav. Right, he impurified his body. I'm going to have pity on him, or in any case, I'll have pity on him. Dak, dal totaina ali, close the door. Karnavlo agadeh, I won't take off his horns. Ad kam midat rishayim. Okay, so the first four were bad people, evil people. Aval midat tzadikim, now we're going to do it in a way for the tzadikim. Atbash, im atabosh, gardak. Okay, atbash is im ata, right? This is a little different. It's not saying each letter is a word. It's at is a word, ata. Bash is a word, bosh. Gardak, you will live up, if you're embarrassed, meaning really you humble yourself. Gardak, you will live up in the heavens. Okay, in the shamayim. Imatau seken gor bedok, you'll live in the heavens. Hatz vaf. Okay, hey and chet often switch around here. So they use the hey as a chet. Chatzitza havu beinach la'af. There'll be a separation between the anger of God and you, if you're a good person. Chastan, imatam izdazeh minas satan. Zachastan. Imatam izdazeh, zaz mizdazeh. If you are shocked from the satan, meaning you stay far away from the satan. Yam kol. Okay, so then what do we, by the way, how do they get to satan? Chas is, the chet is a hey, and the samach is like a sin, which also switches around in these kind of things. So hasatan, so za hasatan. Yam kol. So now what will happen? Well, Amar sar shel gehenom. Here we start to get the yam kol is a reference to the words of the sar shel gehenom that he says before God. Ribono shel olam layam kol. I want to put everybody into the sea. And then God responds, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, and now he responds because we already finished. So now how does he respond? We finished the Atbash here. Now we have a different code. The code is skip every 7 letters. Okay, so achas, bita, you start with aleph and then you skip. Then you get to bita, okay, you skip again and you start from bet and you get to tet. Achas, bita, gif. Ani chas alehem mipnei shaba'ato b'gif. No, you can't have them and you can't destroy them because I will have pity on them because they kicked away adultery. Dechatz, what is dechatz a reference to? Dakim hem, they're pure. Kainim hem, they're honest. Tzadikim hem, they're tzadikim. Halak, okay, again the hey and chet switch, so you're going to have chelek. Ein lecha chelek behem, you have no place, you can't have them. Umirazan shat. So now what's mirazan shat? Amar gehenom lefanav. So now again we go back to hell is talking to God. But I need sustenance. Give me some people. I need the all of humankind, all the sons of Shet, the son of Noach. Amar le, al bam gandas. Okay, another code. Al is aleph to lamed to the middle, bet to mem, gimel to nun, dalet to samach. Lehechan olicham. Okay, so al means, first he says, no, I won't give them to you. Bam gandas, which is, where will I send them to? La'an olichem, lehechan olichem, legan hadas. I am sending them to Gan Hadas, which is another word for Gan Eden. Ha-vaf, amar genom lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ribono shel olam, ayef anochi, I'm tired, I need someone. Give me somebody to help me. Zatzchak. So what does he say to them? Halalu za'o shel Yitzchak. Remember we had that whole story about who's the one who's going to save them? Is it Avram? Is it Yitzchak? It's Yaakov? And in the end we said Yitzchak's the only one. So he says these are the people of the descendants of Yitzchak. Tar yash kat. Tar yeshli kitot shel avdei kochavim shani noten lecha. Fine, you want somebody? I'll give you the pagan worshippers. I'm going to keep the Jewish people. You can't have them. And this is all referenced in the Aleph-Bet and codes of the Aleph-Bet. Okay, this is, you call kind of cute, right? It's understanding these words. And again, to our modern eye, it's hard to really understand, but I think they really had this understanding of codes and letters and gematria, and all that was this whole world that we have a less of an understanding about. Okay, I just want to, reading in the chat, someone wrote about the letters of Emet are far apart because the Aleph is the first letter. Oh, that's what it is. I see. That it's the distance in the Aleph-Bet. That the Aleph and Taf are the last letters and Emet is the middle, whereas the letters of Sheker are consecutive but out of order. I see. That's what it is. Thank you for correcting me. Okay. Moving on now to the next Mishnah. HaKotev shtei otiot be'elem echad chayav. We're now going to get into all the basics of writing. Number 1, how many letters? So we just said shtei otiot, 2 letters it has to be. Now the question is, what is it written with? What is it written on? How far apart can they be? All different issues about writing. So we're going to have a list, and I charted this all out. Of the first are going to be all things that you're obligated, that you would have to, you're obligated by Torah law, you'd have to bring a sin offering if you did it b'shogeg, versus all the kinds where you're going to be patur, which again means you're not allowed to do this, but it's only forbidden by rabbinic law, and you wouldn't have to bring a sacrifice. So if you write shtei otiot be'helei mecha, remember what helei mecha means? It means you didn't know it was Shabbat, or you didn't know it was forbidden to write. You wrote your 2 letters and then you find out. Helei mecha means you wrote your 2 letters within one time frame, in the sense that you only found out later that it was forbidden. If you found out in the middle, that's what we would call about yesh yediyah lechatzi shiur, ein yediyah lechatzi shiur, something we learned just recently. So if you write 2 letters be'helei mecha, you're chayav. That's your classic case of being obligated. Katav b'dio. Now we're going to talk about what did you write with. Gio is ink. Sam, Sikra, Kumus, Rukan, Kanton. We're going to talk later in the Gemara. They're going to ask, because again, this is classic. The people in the Gemara didn't know what the wording they used in the Mishnah, so they're going to ask and explain it. And again, we're not going to necessarily understand everything that the people in the Gemara are talking about, but we'll try. Ubechol davar shehu roshem. Anything that lasts, okay, that puts its imprint. Al shnei kotlei zaviyot. If you put it on 2 corners, 2 different walls, but in the corner, okay, where they can be read together. Al shnei luchei pinkas. If you write it on two boards of a notepad type thing, again, their notepads weren't like our notepads, and they could be read together, then you're going to be chayav. Hakotev al basaro chayav. You might have thought, if you write on your, right, people write often on their hands to remember something, doesn't really last, but yet they say, this you be chayav. Rashi says if you write with ink, it would have to be with ink with something that is long-lasting, not with something that could rub off very easily. Hamisaret al basaro, if you etch it into your skin. Rabbi Eliezer mechayev chatat v'chachamim potrim. Okay, Rabbi Eliezer says you're obligated by Torah law. Chachamim say you're not. It's not forbidden by the Torah. We're going to have something very interesting with this when we get to the Gemara. Katav bin mashkin b'mei perot ba'avak drachim ba'avak sofrim ubechol davar sheino mitkayem. Let's start from the end. If you write with anything that doesn't last, patur. Okay, this is classic for Shabbat. In order for it to be considered Malach HaMachshev, it has to be something that's going to last. So if you write with the following things, let's go through them. You write with fruit juice. Okay, it's got color, but it's not going to really last. If you write with avak drachim, with the dirt from the ground, this is interesting. So theoretically, you could take dirt from the ground and kind of, it'll make, right, it has color to it. But Rashi brings a different explanation, which to me doesn't sound like the pshat, because it sounds like in this list, and if we continue on, you'll see why, it's talking about substances you're using for writing. So the next is avak sofrim, which is the extra stuff left at the bottom of your ink. Okay, there's some powdery stuff left. Or anything that's eino mitkayem. It sounds like you're using something that's eino mitkayem, but Rashi brings a second answer, and he says maybe it means avak drachim be'etzba'os sarat kemo otiot ba'afar naguf. Right, I used to go to the beach as a kid, we always used to write on the sand. So that would be forbidden to do on Shabbat. According to this, it would only be forbidden by rabbinic law because it's not lasting. And avak drachim maybe means you wrote not with, the bet could not necessarily mean with avak drachim, but on avak drachim. Okay, on the dirt in the road, you etched out your name or anything. Next exemption, la'achar yado, if you use the back of your hand to write with, biraglo, you use your leg, bipiv, you use your mouth, or b'marpeko, or your elbow. These are all atypical ways of writing. Katav ot echad samuch lichtav, bichtav al gabei ktav. Okay, all these cases are exempt by Torah law. If you write, let's say there was already a letter in existence from before Shabbat. It was just one letter. Let's say it was a shin. And you put a mem right next to it. And then with that, you wrote the name Shem. Would you be obligated? Because it's true. You didn't write two letters, but you did form a word now with two letters by adding that one letter. So again, only by rabbinic law. Uchtav al gabei ktav, if you write on top of letters that were already written. It already said Shem, and you wrote on top of that Shem. Okay, you wouldn't be obligated by Torah law. Nitkaven lechtov chet v'katav shnei zayin. Okay, for this you need to know what a chet looks like in the Torah. I'll show you in the Koren. The chet is not like our chet. Our chet has a straight line at the top. But if you look here, if you're looking on the video, you can see that the chet goes up in the middle. They're going to call it in the Gemara later, it has a gog, it has a roof. Okay? It kind of has a roof is always triangular. So it goes straight, and then right in the center, it goes up. So imagine, right, a chet could be like two zayins together, really, with that, right? If you separated them, that's what it would be. So if you meant to write a chet, and it accidentally came out as two zayins, again, since you were only intending to write one letter, but you ended up with a bit of a separation in the middle, and you ended up with two letters, that's not considered writing two letters because you really only meant to write one. Achat ba'aretz ve'achat b'korah. Now, in this case, you can't read them both at the same time. You wrote one on the floor and one on the ceiling. Katav al shnei kotzlei habayit, if you wrote on two different walls. Al shnei dapei pinkas, on two different notepads. Ve'ein nehegim zeim zem, they can't be read together. Patur, you're exempt. Katav ot echad notrikon. This is an interesting one. If you write resh chupchik, right, with a little apostrophe there. So what does that mean? That means Rebbe. So the question is, did you write the word Rebbe? Because everybody knows that you wrote the word Rebbe, which means that even though you wrote one letter, it actually means more than one letter. It means a whole word. So are you obligated? Rabbi Yeshua ben Betera Machayev v'chachamim potrim. There's a debate about it. And there's even a debate within this debate among the Rishonim. What if you wrote, according to this, so some say it means a whole word, so you're obligated. And some say, no, it's just a letter, so you're not, right? The Chachamim say it's just a letter, you're not obligated. What would the rabbis say if you wrote an abbreviation that was two letters long? Now, in that case, you wrote two letters, and you're obligated if you write two letters. Or maybe the rabbis say, no, you didn't write a whole word, so you're not obligated because it's only symbolic of a whole word, but it's not actually a whole word. So there's debate what they would say if it were two letters. Two-letter notricon. Now the Gemara is going to start off, and what's interesting is when it talks about get, they also talk about when you write a get, it's also a matter of what can you write a get with, because again, it also has to last. So first they're going to quote they're going to explain what all these things are, and these substances were also mentioned by Gittin, and then they're going to quote some sources about what you write a get with and bring them up here. Geo is juta. Okay, that doesn't really help us, but that means it's suit. Okay, that's what they use for their ink. Sama. Okay, none of these really help us. Okay, but if you go with the Koren's translation, they explain Sama is a yellow tinged arsenic. Sikra. Amarabba Barbrachana. Sakarta shma. Okay, it's called sakarta, which is a lead-based red paint. Again, I'm going with what it says in the Koren. Kumus. Kuma. Okay, which comes from the sap of a tree. They say it's gum Arabic from the sap of a tree. Kanton, Amar Rabba Barbrachana, Amar Shmuel, Charta de Uchshefe. This is the black that the shoemaker uses to color the shoes black. Ubechol davar shehu roshem. So now, whenever you have this and anything that lasts, so it obviously comes to include something that wasn't already included. La tuye mai, what does this come to include? And here they're going to quote from Gittin, what it says there. Haditani Rabbi Chanina, katvo b'mei talia va'aptza. If you write with the water that comes from this fruit called the tarya or gall nuts, that's apsa, kasher. Okay, those juices actually are it's kasher for a get, which means that you'd be obligated for writing. It's considered something that lasts. Tani Rabbi Chia, katvo be'aval, which is with lead, b'shachor, with the soot, or b'shichor, which seems to be the shoemaker stuff, kasher. Okay, this was also a braita by get. Your get is going to be kosher, which means, again, you're going to be obligated for writing on Shabbat. Now we get to the best part of today's daf, at least I think so. And what's going to be more interesting about this is what doesn't appear in your text. It actually depends whether you have a regular Gemara in front of you or if you have the Koren. The Koren version actually put back the version that was taken out because of the censor. And part of this is taken out, and I quoted it to you. It's at the bottom of the first side of today's sheet. I quoted, first we'll read what it says in our Gemara, and then I'll read you the section that was taken out from after that. The Gemara starts off and says, HaMesaret al basaro. So we said if you etch something on your basar, so there's a machloket. Rabbi Eliezer says it's forbidden by Torah law. The Chachamim exempt you. So in this braita, there was a discussion between Rabbi Eliezer and the rabbis. Tanya, Amar lahem Rabbi Eliezer, who said you're obligated, says to Chachamim, V'halo Ben Setada. Okay, somebody named Ben Setada. We'll see who he was soon, or maybe we won't, but we'll try. Hotzik shafim mitzrayim b'srita sha'al b'saro. He wanted to get secrets of the Egyptian magic, right? We know they were famous for their magic, out of Egypt. Now, it was forbidden to take out, they would check you, customs check. When you leave the country, they check, make sure you're not taking out any magic, any of these spells or anything else. So what did he do? Instead of taking paper written, he basically he etched it into his arm so that it would, or somewhere on his body, so that he would have it, and with that he got out of Egypt doing this. So, you see, look, this is something that lasts, and therefore, why aren't you saying you'll be obligated? Amrulo, shoteh haya ve'em mevi'im ra'aya min hashotim. He was a fool, and we don't bring proofs from fools. That's their answer. And that's where the sugya ends according to the regular text of the Gemara. But there was more to this text than meets the eye. The Gemara asks, okay, and this was taken out because of the censor, Ben Setada, Ben Pendira Hava. Who? He's not Ben Setada, and by the way, it appears in other sugyot, and also in those sugyot, they have this section, and it's also taken out. Ben Setada, he was called Ben Pandira. His father was Pandira, not Setada. So they're going to have three possible answers. The first is, Amar Rav Chisda, Baal Setada, Boel Pandira. His mother's husband, his name was Setada, but the one she slept with and gave birth to him was Pandira. So then they say, wait, but Baal, Papos ben Yehudahu. Her husband was Papos ben Yehuda, wasn't Setada. Ela imo Setada. They say, the mother, her name was Setada. They say, what do you mean her name was Setada? Imo, Miriam Magdala Se'ar Nashyahavi. Her name was Miriam Magdalene, who was the woman who braided people's hair. Now, who's that, right? What does this sound like? You can see where this is going. Sounds like Jesus' mother. Ela kede'amre b'pupadita satatat dami ba'ala. She left her husband. That's what they say in Pumbedita. That's why she was called Setada. He was the son of Setada. That's a reference to his mother, who had left her husband and basically went off. So this seems to be a reference to Jesus. Some people think it is, and that's why they took it out because of the censorship. However, when this Ben Setada character is mentioned, he's mentioned in connection with people who did not live in the time when Jesus was alive. And therefore, many people say this is actually not Jesus, it's somebody else. But it's a very interesting section. Is this Jesus? Is it not? You can go look it up. There's lots to read about it. Okay, moving on. Katav ot echad samuch lachtav. We're now going to take the next few cases in the Mishnah, and for this I did a chart, and each time they're going to say, which is the Tana that says this? Because apparently all of these issues were, okay, so thank you, Carolyn, for saying that Mary Magdalene wasn't Mary, Jesus' mother, she was a different Mary. Okay, so there you have that. Someone asked, is this why we're not supposed to have tattoos, right? That also relates to the tattoo issue, although they don't really address it head on. Okay, in any case, let's move on. So, katav echad samuch lachtav. So we're now going to say each of these cases was the subject of Tanaitic debate, and they're going to say, our Mishnah follows X's opinion or doesn't follow so-and-so's opinion. Man Tana, so who's the Tana who said if you added one letter to a letter that already existed, you would not be obligated by Torah law? Man Tana amar Rabbi Rav Huna de lo ke Rabbi Eliezer. De'i Rabbi Eliezer ha'amar echad al ha'arig chayav. Rabbi Eliezer holds that if you take something that was already in the middle of being sewn and you add one more strand to it, since it's already in existence, there's something of it in existence, you're actually going to be obligated for sewing one, which means that you'd also be obligated for adding one letter to a pre-existing letter. So therefore, it's not like Rabbi Eliezer. Katav al gabe katav. If you wrote on something that was already written, man Tana, who's the Tana? Amar Rav Chisda de lo ke Rabbi Yehuda de Tanya. It's not like Rabbi Yehuda because it says in the following Braita, הרי שהיה צריך לכתוב את השם, ונתכוון לכתוב יהודה, וטעה ולא הטיל בו ד', מעביר עליו קולמוס ומקדשו. Here you have a strange case. Someone's supposed to write the name of God in the Torah, but they get confused for a minute, and they intend to write the word Yehuda. Now, when you write the name of God, you have to have intent to write the name of God. So he started writing the word Yehuda. But when he wrote the word Yehuda, maybe this is like a Freudian slip kind of thing, he accidentally forgot the Daled, and it came out as the name of God. So now he wrote the right thing, but he didn't have the right kavanah. So if he didn't put the dalet in, ma'avir alav kulmus u'makacho, according to Rabbi Yehuda, he just writes over what he already wrote, and in that way he sanctifies this name of God. The chachamim omrim ein Hashem min hamuvchar. The rabbis disagree and say, now here it seems to be ein Hashem min hamuvchar means this isn't a good way to do it. It seems the rabbis totally disagree with Rabbi Yehuda, but when they say ein Hashem min hamuvchar, they say even according to you that you can technically do it, you really shouldn't be doing this. Okay, it's not the real proper kavanah. But in any case, what do you see here? Rabbi Yehuda thinks that writing on top of already pre-existing writing is writing. Here's further proof that we learn laws of writing from Hilchot Sefer Torah. So now we learn, according to Rabbi Yehuda, writing on writing would count, which means you would be obligated on Shabbat, and therefore our Mishnah must not be like Rabbi Yehuda. Tana, katav ot echad v'shlima sefer. There's a braita that says if you write one letter and it becomes the last letter in the book, according to Rashi, we're only talking about Sifrei Kodesh, okay, not like a random book that you're writing as an author, but if it's a Sefer Kodesh, one of the Sifrei Tanakh, arag chut echad v'shlima lebeged, if you do the final sewing of the final weaving of a cloth or a shirt or something, you be chayav, even though you didn't do two stitches or you didn't do two letters. Man Tana, who's the Tana of this? Amar Rav Huna, Rabbi Eliezer. It must be Rabbi Eliezer who said echad al harig chayav. But the Gemara is going to say, Rav Ashi is going to say, not necessarily. Afilu tema Rabbanan lahashlim shane. Here, even the rabbis might agree because you actually finish something, and then it becomes a debate here. Is because you finish something, does that make it significant? And then according to the Meiri, you're obligated for writing or weaving when it comes to weaving. According to the Rambam, you're chayav because of makeh b'patish, because you put the final blow. So there's a debate about is it the final blow, or because you finished it, that gave that one thing that you did significance, and therefore you're obligated for that of malacha. Am Rabbi Ami, katav ot echad b'Tiberia v'echad b'Tzipori, okay, which are not terribly far. You could walk there on Shabbat, apparently. Chayav, ktivahi. Okay, this is still called ktiva. So then the Gemara says, Ela shemachusar kreva. You're just missing bringing them together. But you wrote one there, Theoretically, you could just bring what you wrote from there to there, and you'd be obligated. But didn't we say if you write in two different places and they're not read together, then you're exempt? So they say, there you'd have to do something to actually connect them. It's very hard. Two different walls, you'd have to take apart a wall to move it over. But here, you could just carry it from one to the other and you could do it. Tana. So last part for today. If you correct one letter, you're obligated. So they say, that's really strange. Hashta, right? That's a braita, but that braita makes no sense. Hashta katav otechad patur, higia otechad chayav. How could if you write one letter, you wouldn't be obligated by Torah law, but if you fix a letter, you would be? It doesn't make any sense. So we're going to have two answers. Amrav sheshet hacha b'mayas kinan, kigon shenatlo legago shel chet v'asao shnei zayinim. If you fixed one letter in which you made two letters, you took out the middle part of the chet, which we said, now you make two zayins out of it, that's one correction that actually causes the writing of two letters. Or, Rava Amar, a different answer, Kigon shenatlo litago shel dalid v'asao resh. If you took out the extra piece of the dalid and you made it into a resh, then what did you do? According to the Rishalmi, you actually erased the dalid and you wrote the resh. That's one possibility. So you're obligated. This is interesting because you didn't write two letters, but you erased one and wrote one. That's considered like two actions. Or theoretically, which is a little strange that you would say you'd be obligated that because they're each two different malachot. Or Rashi says it's because you finished a book. There was one correction needed in the sefer and you corrected that thing, and then it becomes because you finished a book. Okay, and then again, it would be, is it makebet patish or is it writing, depending on where you fall in that machloket. Okay, with that, we'll finish for today, and we'll pick up with more issues about writing, finish the 12th parak tomorrow, and start the new parak. That's it for today.